You're listening to There Ought to Be a Law, the Center for Auto Safety podcast with Executive Director Michael Brooks, Chief Engineer Fred Perkins, and hosted by me, Anthony Cimino. For over 50 years, the Center for Auto Safety has worked to make cars safer. Hey, listeners, welcome to June 10th, 2 days before the supposed release of the Tesla non-robo-taxi remote control nonsense.
Do you want to redo that?
No, I don't want to redo it. I wish we were recording when that thing was put out, but it's probably going to be delayed, right? Right.
Well, nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Estelle always does what they say. You know that. And good morning, everybody.
Yeah.
Details are scarce and for good reason.
Yeah. So I got to jump in something a little personal. This is the weirdest thing, but I've noticed in my neighborhood, not one, but there are two Fisker Oceans driving around my neighborhood.
Wow.
Did they not get the memo? Like,
maybe they haven't had to go in for warranty service yet. I don't know.
The only redeeming quality of these cars is I like the paint job. Their colors are unique. But other than that, I'm like, oh God, get it off the road. Come on. But anyway. Speaking of getting things off the road, let's start off with Sean P. Duffy. The P stands for pretty. I don't know. He's announcing key steps to make cars more affordable in America again, which basically means saying, hey, we hate the environment. Roll coal. What they're doing is saying, hey, the CAFE standards, the corporate average fuel economy, is too damn high. We need to make cars less efficient. Hey, auto manufacturers, you know what you've spent the last 20 years doing, making your engines more efficient? You're stupid. You're wasting money. Make them less efficient. My ride-on mower gets fine. Let's do that. Put that in cars. They really hate breathing, and so that's what they're doing, and they're saying this will make cars cheaper. Will it?
Well, no, of course not. It's stupid. I mean, there's no warehouse full of clunky old cars that they can, or clunky old engines that they can put into new cars. These production is scheduled years in advance. Production chains and supply chains are working, to establish the products that they need to support their plans. And it costs a lot of money to say, well, no, we're going to interrupt our plans that we've been pushing for the last 5 years. And instead, we're going to develop new cars, new engines that are worse than the ones we're doing now. And we're going to, scrap these supply chains and investments we've made in all of this apparatus. Exhaust gas recycling, for example, that's in production. It's all good. It increases mileage. It helps the cars run better. So now you're going to change your supply chain and your design to remove that. Well, if you remove that, it means you've got to also change the combustion chamber design because it's going to have different gases flowing in, yada, yada, yada. So you're going to have to invest a lot of money to make your engines worse. And this is going to cost both you and your suppliers billions of dollars to make things that will be more expensive for people to operate. This is just the height of stupidity, which I guess is the new standard for political initiatives.
Make America wheeze again. That's how I look at it.
Well, there's a lot going on here. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in CAFE that we can't delve into on the podcast because then no one would listen because it's just very convoluted. There's, when CAFE rulemakings come out, the docket is just so full of scientific papers and all sorts of projections and economic and so much stuff that it becomes hard to follow. And I know our listeners don't want to hear all that. I don't want to read all that stuff. But essentially here's the administration's, kind of doubling down on what.
Hey, Michael, can we interrupt for a second?
Yep.
So for those of you not paying for the premium video version of this, Fred and I were just gesticulating wildly because your audio got very quiet. Yes, I'll fix it in post, but it was very you were talking in almost whisper mode. Is there a way we
You
can
have to
get you talk
occasionally
louder?
look at the screen, Michael.
Yeah, and see us flailing like freaks.
Right, you hear me? You hear me now?
I can hear you, but you're very quiet.
That's weird.
It is very strange.
Can
It's
you hear
not
me
like
now?
you to be very
Yeah,
quiet.
little more on the gain.
How do I do that?
There we
Let's
go.
see here.
Hey, yes.
Okay.
All
right,
right.
I'm back, everyone.
Okay. Ooh.
I was whispering about this idea that there is an electric vehicle mandate that has been pushed. You know, it's basically forms the basis of this. You know, really the only electric vehicle mandate in any sense in the country is in California, and even that I think is under consideration as to whether that can actually be met given the way the electric vehicles have progressed. But essentially here, the secretary is saying, look, we're going back to the 1975 law that Congress passed during the middle of the fuel crisis in the 70s. And we're going to interpret current cafe standards based on that statute, which, you know, they have the authority to do. And we're not going to allow NHTSA to consider electric vehicles and other alternative fuel vehicles in cafe standards because that means that gasoline vehicle manufacturers have to do so much more to catch up with these more efficient vehicles. I mean, I think that's a long way of saying we don't want more efficient vehicles, right? We want people, and they keep, you know, putting it in terms of consumer choice, which ultimately here, you know, automakers aren't incentivized if they're not incentivized anymore under this interpretation to make their gasoline powered cars more efficient, which is the ultimate point of CAFE. And what that means is consumers are going to pay more at the pump. And, you know, while the administration continues to focus on consumer choice or choice of vehicles, the real impact is that the auto industry is going to be less incentivized to produce vehicles using alternate fuel sources like EVs, like hybrids, anything else that might come down the pipe of technology that would boost our ability not to use gasoline. So what's going to happen is you'll frankly be getting less choice in the type of vehicle that you're going to be able to buy. And while selling the vehicles with lower fuel economy will allow manufacturers to save money, and you know, it also might could allow vehicles to have a lower sticker price because they're not putting all this efficient technology into vehicles. You know, the amount that's spent on fuel by consumers is going to counteract any savings you get there. Plus, you know, we're still worried the impact of tariff is going to ensure pretty much that none of these savings are passed on to the consumers. So all of this garbage going on at the top probably is not going to trickle down and result in lower prices for any of us.
But
more expensive at the pump, more expensive in the showroom, more expensive you're limiting the market for the manufacturers because they will no longer be able to sell in Europe or Asia because, you know, these cars just won't go. So, you know, it's the only objective here is to increase the profit margins for those few companies that are foolish enough to actually put additional investment into producing worse cars. This is a very strange situation, which can only be written off to gross stupidity.
Hey, I don't want to pay for a catalytic converter if it's going to get stolen anyway. What's the point? But yeah, so, okay, the U.S. is, I mean, I imagine a very large part of the auto market, but as Fred just pointed out, yeah, you can't be able to sell these cars in Europe. You won't be able to sell them in Asia. Even Latin America is putting in some sort of emission standards. So what's this is the complaint they always have is like, oh, we have to follow California's regulations for the US. But it's like, yeah, you got to follow Germany's and England's and Japan's and the whole rest of the world that says, hey, we don't want to breathe in particulates all the time. It's
yeah, well, I mean, they're building different cars here than they build for Europe, right? I mean, there's a whole fleet of safety standards now in Europe that is more advanced than what we have in the United States. So, and if we talk about the Euro NCAP stuff in the podcast today, in the interview with David Ward, the director there, there's, it's something that's been happening since the 1990s. America is being left behind by countries that are more willing to put regulations on the books to ensure that consumers are safe and protected from harmful emissions and are saving money at the pump and have actual consumer choice. So we're in kind of a pickle here in America.
Yeah. Speaking of please go.
Yeah, I was just going to say that speaking of consumer choice, let's not forget that right now Chinese cars are prohibited from sales in the United States. And Chinese cars are now, I think, getting to be the largest producer of automobiles in the world, right? They've stepped up into doing that. Certainly for electric vehicles, they're producing them much cheaper, much higher volume than anyone else in the world. So while this is stupid at so many levels, it's also promoting the comparative advantage of the Chinese manufacturers in the world market.
Yeah, and one day, with say the next administration comes along and reinstitutes a lot of the rules that the Biden administration did, the United States is automatically going to be behind these other countries because you've spent the last 4 years not building your market towards electric vehicles and other alternative forms of fuel. So it's this whole I don't know. It seems like this very specific American focus is ultimately going to hurt us in the long run by trying to boost our status in the world economy now. It's an odd way to go about it.
Yeah, I wonder if manufacturers actually really pay attention to this too much. I mean, sure, I'm sure the U.S. auto manufacturers, but like Toyota, they have a very different approach.
They have a very different approach, period,
for everything
when it comes to electric vehicles.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But you mentioned David Ward, the now recently retired head of Europe NCAP, their new car assessment program. And it's an article I wish we could share, but unfortunately it's paywalled behind Bloomberg. And he's talking about setting up safety standards. So when he came over to take over Europe NCAP in the 90s, the U.S. was ahead in terms of safety. They came in and said, hey, let's fix things and make cars safer. Now Europe is much farther ahead in terms of safety than the U.S. He's put in place these programs in Latin America, in India, and really standardizing things. So quoting from this article, this is from David Ward saying, my view is that the more governments around the world can coalesce around a common framework of vehicle standards, the better it is for industry because they can capitalize on economies of scale. Right now, regulatory standards in emerging markets are playing catch up as those countries absorb a huge expansion in vehicle fleets. It's important to get emerging markets to embrace common standards shared with high-income countries. Otherwise, we'll get to a two-tiered world of car safety. He's got my vote.
Yeah, I mean, that's great until you kind of realize that the United States is historically, even though we played a major role in setting up things like the United Nations, we've historically been very hesitant to, actually ratify and adhere to the rules that are created by international legal bodies. I mean, it would be awesome, right, if we had a worldwide vehicle safety standards that were very protective and that, countries couldn't just opt out of. But given the United States history in this area and a lot of the anti-globalist types that seem to infiltrate our government from time to time, I'm not sure if it's a feasible path, in the future, although it's really paying dividends in other countries, especially since the 90s. The Latin America and India and Africa have all benefited significantly from some of the increased safety standards that have been put in place around the world.
Crazy. I don't remember what was going to come out of my face, but it was going to be really good. It's going to be really good, but I don't know what it is anymore. Let's jump to AAA. AAA has a survey about that Americans are slow to adopt electric vehicles. And this is interesting, quoting from their report. In 2022, gas prices reached $5, prompting many Americans to consider transitioning to electric vehicles as a cost-effective option. In that year's survey, 77% cited gas savings as their top motivation to purchase. Now the national average for a gallon of regular ranges from $3 to $3.50 or even higher, depending on states. So they're saying that, hey, gas prices drop. People don't want to buy EVs anymore. Maybe. I'm sure that's part of it. Also, I think people realized, wait, Tesla's been lying to us. They also point out that, people still have range anxiety and that they have concerns about availability of electric chargers. I think we've discussed repeatedly on this show that range anxiety for 99% of your life is completely irrelevant, considering that most commutes are 30 miles a day, something in that range.
Yeah.
Which, you can do on the tiniest little battery possible.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that with a plug-in hybrid. You don't even need a fully electric vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, the distance is so short, you just need a long enough extension cord and you can remain plugged in the entire time.
Yeah, some of the factors in here, they make sense to me, right? I mean, I think, having had a daughter 10 hours away in college would hedge me against the long distance travel in an EV. That's 57% of the folks in the survey by AAA cited that, EVs are unsuitable for long distance travel. As someone who doesn't like to stop, likes to basically drive straight through and stop for, a few minutes, 5 minutes at a time to get gas, get something to eat quickly and get back on the road, sitting at a charging station for an hour is simply unacceptable to me. And, I can't get around that. And then between that and the simple cost of EVs, which, yes, there are a very few affordable EVs. Speaking of consumer choice, they're just, you simply don't have the options there at the price I'm willing to spend on a car. And so some of these factors resonate, pretty strongly with me. I agree that EVs really aren't quite there yet. They're certainly not as convenient as gasoline powered vehicles. But their upside may one day be far, some of these factors may be mitigated in the future. I mean, right now we're seeing the Trump administration go after the electric charging infrastructure. And that's going to be a huge problem since, most people are concerned about that and aren't going to buy an EV unless it's just as easy to fill up at a charger as it is to fill up at a gas station. So we still got a long way to go here before electric vehicles, I think. And that I'm kind of glossing over some of the problems we talk about frequently, which is the sheer weight of the batteries going into and the increase in the size of our fleets and the impact that's going to have on safety. So there's still a lot of unresolved issues here. And I think part of the reason that there is such a backlash to electric vehicles is because, there have been a lot of promotion of electric vehicles and a lot of attempts to push them. There have been a lot of attempts to push them on America in some way, perhaps before they're completely ready for prime time. And, that's contributed to some of this political upheaval we're seeing around electrification.
Hey, listeners, do you have an electric vehicle? If so, maybe you got a couple extra bucks left over. Go to autosafety.org, click on donate. If you support electric vehicles, click on donate. If you don't support electric vehicles, click on donate. If you support Michael's view that we need a one world government to regulate safety in cars, click on donate. Why not? I'm curious about the AAA thing because I imagine AAA, they're just surveying their members, and I think their members probably skew a little older and a little more conservative than
perhaps
the average bear.
AAA's also, they're very. I think they continually support the idea of vehicle choice. I don't think they're not in the same corner as the Center for Auto Safety when it comes to heavy electric vehicles. And for whatever reason, I think that's because they depend on a variety of members across the country, and they like to play it safe politically.
Okay. I can agree with that. Hey, let's play a little gaslight fun. I'm gonna kick off some gaslighting. My gaslight this week is gonna be, and I don't know if one of you guys have chose this. No, it's not Kathy Wood. It's not Waymo. It's the Wall Street Journal.
That's going to be mine.
Oh, that was going to be yours. Sorry. The Wall Street Journal has this incredibly stupid article, and I'm a big fan of the Wall Street Journal. Their reporters are top notch.
They are, and well, most of them.
Their editorial page is written by people who don't read the newspaper. Anyway, this article is titled "The Car of the Future Will Transform the Great American Road Trip." And it is literally a GM puff piece from like 1930s about welcome to the future. It's pointing out that, hey, we're on the cusp of cars that drive themselves. We don't need steering wheels and everything like that. We'll turn your car into a little movie theater, a salon, a place for you to hang out with friends. It's beyond absurd. It's, they have Cadillac showing off these concept vehicles. And I'd like to point out that Cadillac, General Motors, they can't even get advanced emergency braking working at highway speed. So, yeah, I don't think this is happening anytime soon. They can't do anything basic like this. I'm not going to trust them to be like, oh, this car, I'm going to watch a movie. Again, we pointed out most commutes are under 30 miles. What are you doing? What's happening here? So my gaslight of the week, the Wall Street Journal. Boo.
All right, I'm just gonna go with the Wall Street Journal as well, because I want to touch on a couple other things. First of all, everyone take a look at the picture at the top of this article if you can access it. It's essentially a family and a dog around a circular table with swivel chairs. Oh, there's a cat too.
There's a cat. They're drinking wine.
They're drinking wine. It looks like there's a glass of wine in front of a child too.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh, they could be French.
There's no planet on which people are going to be able to be on roads riding around unrestrained in swivel chairs and be safe. It's I don't know where this world is, but it's not a world where there are any human drivers on the road. I mean, I don't think anyone would be safe in that respect. There's the dad in the photo is standing up in this what looks like a massive camper on wheels.
He's got like an extra 2 feet of headroom above him.
Yeah, and it's just an absurd idea to think that you can ride in a vehicle, any moving conveyance, really, other than perhaps a train or something like that, but without being restrained. I mean, there has to be such a gigantically low margin for error or crash there, because if you're unrestrained like these folks in this picture are, and virtually anything happens to the vehicle, you're going to be in a whole lot of trouble. So that clearly the people, who are writing these articles have their head in the clouds and, aren't really thinking a lot about the safety impact of, dogs and cats and people and wine glasses flying around an enclosed space when you come to a sudden stop at 50 miles an hour. So it just kind of highlights the fantasy that, the Wall Street Journal is latching on to here.
I agree. All right, that's good. So, Fred, there's 2 votes for the Wall Street Journal. Let's point out to listeners, you don't have the greatest track record of winning this. Okay, last week maybe, but what do you got for me this week?
It's going to be tough to beat Wall Street Journal, I confess, but a perennial favorite of mine is Waymo.
You got a fighting chance now. So
this week, Waymo published a video of a dog running across the street, and then on its return trip, a Waymo stopped. And so this is prima facie evidence by Waymo of the safety of Waymos, and got a nice thank you from the owner of the dog. And excuse me, and Waymo said, clearly safety is our first priority. So that's fine. But if you take it apart a little bit, number one, the dog was running illegally on the street. So that's interesting. Number two, you cannot tell from the video whether or not the dog would have been hit by the car. Number three, and most important, clearly safety is not the first priority, because the first priority has got to be operations. Because if the first priority of Waymo were safety, they wouldn't operate the vehicles, right? I mean, think of it for a moment. If Waymo didn't operate the vehicles, there is zero probability of their causing an accident, right? So
I like that. This is like you're saying if like Smith and Wesson said, our number one priority is safety.
that's
So we're
right.
going to
Yeah.
shut down, right?
So,
Well, I mean, if the entire auto industry shut down today and we eliminated cars, no one would die in car crashes.
right,
Right.
there you go.
But
So that's, clearly safety is not the first priority. But operations.
we have to get places, though, right? We have to get places.
Second priority has got to be revenue generation, because Waymos are not going to run for free, and they're very proud of the fact that they've got tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of paying customers per week now. So clearly, safety is not their first priority. It's not their second priority, which would be revenue generation. So it's possibly the third priority. I mean, still good for them for not killing the dog that they probably wouldn't have killed anyway, because the dog was trying to avoid the Waymo. But kudos to Rover for surviving the trip. But I what I think about in this situation is that if you were a human being and you put blindfold on and you decided to walk across the street with the blindfold, regardless of the traffic, you would probably survive, because other people would compensate for you. Other people would try to avoid you. People, they try to avoid hitting people, right? So, and it would be thrilling. And every time I see people talk about the Waymo and how thrilling it is to ride in it, and there's no driver, and gosh, I was so excited. Looking at you, Katie Couric. It just reminds me of the fact that you would probably be just fine walking across the street with your eyes closed, hoping that nobody's going to hit you. That would also be thrilling. So, I don't know. It all resolves to Waymo just trying to substitute rhetoric for safety engineering and saying, yeah, we got your back. We'd never do anything to hurt you. But the simple fact that they're out there, the simple fact that their vehicles are threatening dogs and humans and other vehicles unnecessarily, because there's nothing they do that a human being can't do just as well, tells me that safety is not and could never be Waymo's first priority. So I give them my gaslight again.
That's a pretty good one. This is a tough one to score this week, because I mean, Waymo is a favorite, but Michael and I both agreed on the same thing. I'm giving it a tie. I'm being magnanimous this week.
I'm moving up in the ranks. That's good.
Well, I don't know if you're moving up. You didn't move down. Let's put it that way. You didn't go backwards. Yeah.
Is it scary, Fred, that Waymo is performing better than all of the other autonomous vehicle companies that we're aware of on Earth at the moment, and yet we still have concerns about their operation?
Again, limited operating design domain. They're only operating on city streets, only operating at roughly 35 miles per hour at max. Yeah. And again, I still don't, I'd like to ask the executives, the C-suite at Alphabet, what's the business plan here? Because you've already set over $10 billion on fire. You've eliminated humans, but that's not really the expense in this. Like Uber's not sitting there going, if we can only eliminate those minimum wage drivers who let us know when the cars have vomit in them that we can clean, and if tires are damaged and whatnot, if we can get rid of those pesky people, we'll make more money. Like they've not thought this out. Unfortunately, I don't think Google's had a good idea since the late 90s. But
well, I mean, quick correction: Waymo is operating on freeways now, I think, in LA, San Francisco, and Phoenix. I'm not sure how their LA operations are going on at the moment, but I think they've temporarily shut down there. But yes, they're operating on starting to operate on freeways, which, as we've discussed numerous times, are interstates are actually probably the safest place to be based on the data.
Right.
Well, and to be fair, operating on the interstates in Los Angeles and San Francisco is still under 45 miles an hour.
That's true. When I lived there, I remember the traffic going backwards once on the 101, and I was like, "Oh, why do I live here?" Speaking of Waymos in LA, so there's big protests happening in Southern California. And the protesters have a novel idea of they've been requesting Waymos to the protest site, and then they set them on fire. I don't think this is an anti-EV, anti-autonomous vehicle thing. I think this is just an easy way for them to blockade streets, I guess.
I'm
But
sure there's some kind of anti-billionaire thing going on there as well.
maybe. I don't understand. But somebody pointed out, okay, so they're protesting ICE, the Immigration Customs Enforcement. They're protesting ICE by setting EVs on fire. Wouldn't it be better to set ICE vehicles on fire? Keep it consistent. Protesters.
Well, it probably
Primo
would,
meal.
except they have armed guards on the ICE vehicles, so it's a little inconvenient.
They have human drivers in the ICE vehicles. I get you.
They do, yeah. Typically,
Yeah, the ICE vehicles can actually get away. I
right.
think is a big part of this. Whereas an autonomous vehicle that's programmed not to take drastic action in the presence of humans is an easy target, as we've seen, from dozens of different articles involving Waymos and a lot of the vandalism they've been subjected to. The poor Waymos.
But listen,
I was just going to say,
yeah, go.
in other countries, people will often burn tires in the street to provide the same kind of obstruction. But in LA, it's easier to get a Waymo than it is to get a tire, I think. So why not?
Yeah, protests, I get anger and frustration, but don't set an EV on fire just because of the toxic gases from the lithium ion batteries. That's the true danger of what you're doing, is you're creating a massive toxic cloud that, as Fred Perkins has pointed out numerous times, how many fire trucks does it take to put out a Tesla?
At least 10.
I thought it was 30. I told someone recently it was 300.
30. Well, let's see. No, 3,000 gallons, 300 gallons per fire truck minimum. So we're talking about 10 or so. But don't forget, It's going to reignite. So there'll be plenty of opportunities for the home viewers.
It looks like Waymo is also suspending service in some spots in San Francisco as well, in light of the protests that are going on in that area too.
Crazy. Let's continue with California, because this is a fascinating article. This is in NBCarea.com. NBCBayArea.com. I'm sorry. It's talking about that California, which we all know has a bunch of autonomous vehicles out on the road. But in the world of agriculture, it is not allowed. There's a ban on autonomous agriculture equipment. Quoting from the article, when it comes to farming equipment, an operator must be stationed at the controls according to California safety regulations. Those rules were written nearly 50 years ago, long before autonomous tech was developed. That's fascinating. Is this just a holdover of an old law that hasn't been updated? Is there a real safety concern here?
Well, agricultural equipment will often have 50-foot wide booms with cutting tools on them to, cut down wide swaths of corn stalks or rice or whatever. So there's a lot of danger, a lot of blades, a lot of really dangerous equipment. As we've said before many times, dangerous automatic equipment should be separated from human beings by physical barriers so that the human beings don't get killed by the dangerous machinery. This should also be applicable to EVs and autonomous vehicles. But the farmers are trying to turn that around to say, well, if you allow the autonomous vehicles, editor's note, they should not. But if you allow the autonomous vehicles on the road, then you should also allow them on the non-road, because, gosh, what's good for the goose has got to be good for the gander. So this is a complete reversal of logic and human safety, public safety in the vicinity of automatic machinery.
Yeah, I think, I agree. Larry Jacobs, the farmer who's interviewed in the article, is, I totally agree with him that it doesn't make a lot of sense, the incongruence between allowing autonomous vehicles in the street and not allowing them in a field where presumably you're going to have a lot less people at risk due to the operation of these tractors and whatever else they're using out there. But, I think the big difference here is that, there may be more of I think there's a better use case argument for driverless tractors, given the fact that, it's farmers seem to be struggling mightily to find enough workers to operate this type of machinery on their farms. I guess an analogy there could be made to the trucking industry, which is also somewhat short of workers, and is using that as an argument to advance their belief that autonomous trucks are necessary. But on the farm, there's usually no one around. And the safety threat here, I think the safety threat here was actually the reason that the tractors aren't allowed to operate in California autonomously is because of California's what is essentially California's OSHA division. So they're looking at the occupational safety of farm workers who would be around this machinery, I suppose. Perhaps, the autonomous tractors so far have shown that they can, properly harvest a field or plow a field, but they're not able to recognize workers or stop in those situations. Who knows? But for now, and it was a close vote, 4-3 by California's Occupational Safety and Health Standards Board, which suggests that could change soon. And I would expect that it would change soon in light of the fact that the rest of the world seems to be rushing towards this kind of fantasy that autonomy is going to save us from ourselves.
OSHA, that sounds like some left-wing conspiracy started by the guy who started the Center for Auto Safety. If you like that, go to autosafety.org, click on donate, and continue funding that left-wing propaganda machine. Or we continue to talk about safety, but now we're going to talk about someone who is very anti-safety. Let's talk Tesla. Okay, I know. We only got 2 Tesla things we're going to hit, and actually they're both related. From the Drive, Elon Musk's Tesla cries competitive harm over self-driving crash data disclosure. So basically, Tesla says, hey, every time our vehicles crash, where they're using ADAS and autopilot and full self-driving and whatnot, we don't want to share that information with the public. That's right. We want to put these things out on the road and not tell you when it happens. Nope, because then our competitors will find out how crappy we are. Or then consumers really will find out, oh, shit, I'm paying $10,000 for a piece of crap. But I mean, if you ever sat in a Tesla, you'd realize, oh, it's really cheap in plastic. Ooh. Yeah. So this quoting from this article, it really comes down to this. If NHTSA releases Tesla's crash data to the public, it may, whether directly or indirectly, deter people from buying its cars and would be unfair to compel the company to reveal them. How insane is this? Has there ever been any other car or consumer product where we're like, look, we can't tell the public how dangerous and bad this stuff is?
Yeah.
Oh, there has been? Oh,
there have been a lot of that. I mean, the auto industry for decades now has been trying to keep evidence of its crashes out of the public.
Trying. Have they succeeded?
Yes.
Yes. Damn it.
In many respects. I mean, look, there are many situations where crashes occur and the victims in that crash are given a settlement and a gag order. Essentially, they sign a non-disclosure agreement that says they can't talk about it anymore. Before NHTSA made it clear in some of its, I don't know if it was it wasn't a regulation, but I believe they basically let the auto industry know this, but they made it clear that you can't force people to sign non-disclosure agreements that prevent NHTSA from finding out about crashes. I mean, this is something that has gone on forever. The auto industry doesn't want America to have good data and good investigation of crashes involving its vehicles, because it's for the same reason that Tesla is opposing this. If Americans know which vehicles suck and which ones are great at safety, they're not going to buy the bad ones. But Tesla here is kind of performing a sleight of hand, because this is all coming out of the standing general order, which most of our listeners should be familiar with. But basically, Tesla has to submit any crashes involving autopilot or full self-driving to NHTSA. But the problem is when they submit them and the data is made public, if you or I go and click on the NHTSA website and download the spreadsheet, we'll see a lot of Tesla crashes, but there will be very little information on, there's going to be no information on what actually happened in the crash. So a description of a crash happening on a public road in the United States is protected from disclosure from the citizens of the United States. That should get everyone paused right there. But also, Tesla's argument isn't that in court, they're not saying, oh, we don't want consumers to have this information. They're saying because they're asking for protection under confidential business information regulations that NHTSA has. They're saying we don't want our competitors to have access to this information because it will allow them to plan around us and beat us to whatever it is, whatever ultimate goal there is there. So they're saying that it's competitive harm due to the fact that competitors will be able to access our data. This data is nothing that competitors could use. I mean, at most, it's going to be, show what version of the full self-driving or autopilot is being used at the time of the crash. It's not telling competitors anything about the underlying mechanisms or software that's working here. So the argument is bullshit, and we're certainly on the side of the Washington Post in this case, because we have long wanted more information from the standing general order to be made public. Right now, NHTSA can see all the things that Tesla's trying to protect from reaching the public. So NHTSA has that ability to evaluate this information, but traffic safety researchers, advocacy groups, a lot of other groups don't have access to this information, and it makes it very hard to evaluate Tesla's safety performance if you don't have that. And that's exactly what Tesla wants. When they're selling this, giant lie about their cars being autonomous, the last thing they want to do is give the public any transparency as to the actual performance. They haven't even released their rate of interventions and that type of thing, where, how often their driver has to take over. They don't want the public knowing that, because if you compared their data with what Waymo is doing, you would instantly see that Tesla's claims to autonomy are false.
Tesla, the big lie. From an article in MSN we're linking to, Tesla now, this is episode's coming out Thursday. This is the day that Tesla is supposedly releasing the robo-taxis on the streets of Austin. Hopefully no one's been crashed into already. But this article, quoting, Tesla has reportedly sought to block journalist access to Austin's public records concerning the company's plan to launch robo-taxis in the city later this month. Okay, so now they're preemptively suing, saying, hey,
yes,
we're going to put something out there. We don't want anyone to know how shitty it is. Now that's a company with confidence. That's a company who's like, we stand firmly behind our lawyers and not letting anybody know how shitty it is. Oh my God. Tesla, I'm not an investor, but I'd say short sell the hell out of this company. But then again, the people who are investing in this stuff are lunatics. They keep bidding it up. I don't understand. Anyway,
this is a totally weird one too. And we've seen, a lot of the, we're not even sure that, Thursday the 12th is going to be the day where Tesla starts its rollout of these vehicles, or starts operating, or starts taking passengers. The details on what actually is going to happen, like a lot of things involving Tesla, simply aren't available yet. And so it's, there are a lot of promises and a lot of Twitter talk about things, but there are really no hard facts. Tesla apparently, was in a discussion, or was submitting documents to Austin, Texas, about, what their operations were going to be, what processes are going to take place, what's your procedures, what's your strategy. And someone filed a request for those records, an open records request. And now Tesla's objecting to any of that information being turned over because they don't want the public knowing anything about their operations. So, and probably because, it would be quite easy to pick apart what Tesla is telling Austin, for us at least, and to show the public that Tesla doesn't have the proper procedures and strategy in place to safely deploy these things. So there's just a lot of shenanigans going on around Tesla and the supposed deployment of autonomy in Austin.
It does have the sound of desperation to it, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's very much
like maybe your stock is tanking and you need a big hit.
Yeah.
Well, I think when sometimes you get into an Uber or a Lyft and whatnot, and the driver will supply you a little bottle of water. Do you think the Tesla robotaxis will supply a little hit of ketamine?
Ooh.
No, I'm thinking that's what it'll be.
Who knows?
Yeah, a little ketamine, a little Mein Kampf. It'll be a good time. And with that, let's transition to a quick Tao of Fred.
Quick Tao of Fred. Well, we'll dive right in to the ocean. You asked
the ocean.
A couple of weeks ago, why are these ships burning? Why can't they ship electric vehicles without burning the?
There was
the freighters.
Fire last week. Yeah,
I was shipping EVs and caught on fire. Sorry.
So I decided to put a few numbers on this. Any EV has got somewhere between, or hybrid vehicle has got something like 3,000 to 8,000 individual battery cells per car. The Morning Midas, which is the ship that is burning currently off the coast of Alaska, is reportedly carrying 70 fully electric and about 680 hybrid vehicles.
It's still burning a week later, right?
Yeah, it's still burning. And they're just going to let it burn until it burns out. It may sink. We'll find out about that. But there was another fire in 2023 aboard a ship called the Morning. What was it called? It was called something else. Anyway, it had several hundred cars on board by Volkswagen, and they were shipping those to the United States. So if you crunch the numbers a little bit, anywhere around 500 cars, which is what that individual ship had on board, it means somewhere between 1.5 to 4 million battery cells. So we don't know what the battery manufacturers' quality requirements are, but many companies try to achieve what's called Six Sigma quality. You've probably seen that in advertisements. Six Sigma quality for manufacturing, repeatability and safety and all those good things. Few companies actually achieve that. But assuming that the companies who are building the batteries are trying to do that, that means you've got 3.4 defects per million cells, or something like 5 to 12 defective battery cells per 500 EVs, which is a typical number that you'd have on board a ship, right? If you include both the hybrids and the electric vehicles, that's representative of the number that's currently burning off of the coast of Alaska. And it was on the ship that went down with the off the coast of the Azores in 2023. Anyway, digressing a little bit here. So, but if you think of that, if you've got 3.4 defects per million or 5 to 12 defective battery cells per 500 EVs, you've got lots of opportunities and prediction of lots of defective cells in any ship that's carrying a substantial number of electric vehicles. So it's not surprising that occasionally they're going to fail and burst into flames. Not every defect is going to cause it to burst into flames, but the problem with defects is they're random. And among the numbers of things that can happen in a defective cell is the defective membrane separating the anode from the cathode, and that will always cause a spontaneous fire. The problem with these fires is that they're kind of chain reactions, right? And when one goes, it heats up the one next to it, and the one next to it fails, and so on until you've got the whole ship ablaze. So that's why we're seeing that. And I think that is inevitable with the EVs. Now, what's interesting about that to me is that if we're talking about Six Sigma, which is 3 failures per million batteries, something like that, it contrasts vividly with what ARC was saying is the quality requirement for their airbag inflators, which is, if you recall, 95%. Right, so there are orders of magnitude less reliability associated with the airbag inflators than with what would be expected for a battery manufacturer. It's interesting to me that the car companies don't care about this and that they're allowing this wide disparity in safety critical components to be put into their vehicles. Ironically, there was a Norwegian ferry company that is the leader in electric ferries that has banned electric vehicles from being transported on its ships because of the poor safety of the lithium-ion batteries in the electric vehicles. And quoting from their announcement, lithium-ion batteries in electric vehicles pose a significant fire risk, which was further emphasized after the Felicity Ace cargo ship sank almost a year ago. This is the ship off the Azores. Following a safety assessment regarding fire risks, a Norwegian ferry company decided to ban all but purely ICE vehicles from its vessels. This points out, in my mind, the difference between the safety of vehicles that are forced to go through a third-party safety review before they're allowed to be used versus the car vehicles or the automobiles where they vigorously resist any third-party review of the safety of the vehicles. It's a vivid contrast between the safety that is available to car companies if they do the proper thing and get the third-party review, like, for example, through a UL 4600 audit, versus the way they insist on doing business, which is to just put it out there, wait for it to fail, and then try to have a mea culpa that doesn't sink the company. So that's it for this week, folks.
So, Fred, do you have any idea why? Because I think Michael asked this question. Why don't these companies ship the cars with no charge in the batteries? Would that make a difference?
No.
Well, okay.
Charging batteries because they've got to move them into and out of the ship, right? So there's got to be something there.
Okay.
The
low charge. Nah,
real problem is that the lithium-ion batteries don't need oxygen or any external fuel in order to burn. They've got everything they need inside of them. So once they fail, they're just going to go. And you can't have zero charge. For practical reasons, you've got to be able to move the cars in and out of the freighter, unless you're going to lift them out with a crane, but that's not going to happen. Okay. So there are handling requirements that require a certain amount of charge. They try not to have them fully charged, but I'm not sure exactly where they draw the line.
All right. Well, before we jump into recalls, let's do a fun one. That's right. I'm calling this a fun one. Volvo has invented a adaptive seatbelt. Quoting from this article in newatlas.com, in 1959, Volvo engineer Niels Bohlin created the 3-point seatbelt and offered the design plans for free to automakers around the world. Everyone take a moment and applaud Niels Bohlin. How cool is that? He comes up with something that literally saves tons of lives. And he's like, yeah, everyone take it for free. We need this out there. Amazing. Further, the new multi-adaptive safety belt can use data input from interior and exterior sensors to customize protection, adapting the setting based on the situation and individuals' profiles, such as their height, weight, body shape, and seating position. In addition, now this is the part I don't like, the seatbelt's function is expected to get better over time thanks to over-the-air software updates.
That's not a bad thing.
Well,
right?
I just, I don't know.
I mean,
about software.
At least it's not saying that AI is going to do it. It's essentially saying that Volvo's engineers, as the technology develops, are going to be able to make your seatbelt, even more protective of you and update it over the air through the software. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm just happy, and I think all of us on this podcast are happy because none of us are the 5'10", 170-pound male or whatever that's used for crash tests.
You don't know. I could be.
I think it's great that that they're making a belt that could, we've talked a lot about how female bodies are not protected as well in crashes as males for a lot of reasons. A seat belt that adjusts itself to the person in the seat, and frankly, an entire occupant protection system that adjusts to the humans in the car is awesome. That's a great use of technology. I think that's far more useful than deploying autonomy across the streets of America. We see a lot of, certain types of injuries happen to certain size people in crashes. And it's great that Volvo's doing this. And hopefully, it took, the Volvo engineer that created the 3-point seatbelt, it took quite some time before those seatbelts were actually put into all occupant positions in the car. I mean, I know that all of us rode around as children in the back seat with a lap belt only, which has some issues in crashes. And so, it will be interesting to me to see just how long it takes other manufacturers to start putting this type of thing into their vehicles.
We didn't use the lap belt when I was a kid in the back seat. You didn't have to because the cars
didn't use anything.
No,
right?
The cars had this amazing safety system that was this plastic vinyl covering over the seats, and your body would just stick to it. And so if you're ever in an accident, you're just, you're not moving anyway. Let's go to recalls. Mazda, 171,412 vehicles. This is the 2024 to 2025 Mazda 3, the CX-30, and the what's going on here? The battery becomes completely depleted, leaving the ignition switch in the on position for 2 hours or more without the engine running. There's a battery issue. This is just the way it's written is very confusing to me. It's affecting the sophisticated airbag sensor.
as opposed to airbag sensors that don't drink tea with their pinky out, right? So essentially, this is kind of a rare fault that happens. If someone leaves their key in the ignition or the ignition switch in the on position, I'm not sure if these vehicles have keys or not, but if you leave the ignition switch in the on position, I'm assuming it's a key, for 2 hours or more without the engine running, there's a fault that's stored in the airbag sensor unit. And then when the vehicle's restarted, the airbag is non-operational. The airbag warning light comes on for owners out there of these vehicles, so you should have a warning of this. But also don't leave your ignition switch on for 2 hours without the engine running. I can't imagine. I mean, it looks like this was a very random fault in the system, and it's a good thing Mazda caught it before it caused any problems. So owners can expect to hear about this in late July. It looks like they're still developing the exact fix. They may even replace the unit depending on what's going on with your specific vehicle.
Yeah, I can't imagine they actually have a physical key. I don't think. Do they still make cars with physical keys? Because this is a new car.
I think a number of manufacturers do. I know. I mean, my Volkswagen has a physical key. I actually like the physical key, but that's probably just because I'm a little old-fashioned and haven't fully grasped the button yet. It seems like from a human factors perspective, it seems like having a physical key that you have to put in that moves around with you makes it less likely that you're going to leave the car on and possibly leave the transmission in the wrong spot, a lot of different things. So I like keys.
Okay. With that, moving on to the next one. 41,376 vehicles from Cadillac. The 2024 Cadillac Lyric, the 2023 Cadillac Lyric. General Motors has decided that a defect which relates to motor vehicle safety exists in certain years' Cadillac Lyrics. The driver video display in these vehicles may intermittently go blank while driving. God, the infotainment, stupid. Oh, bleh. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it
And-
wasn't the rear view camera at least this time, but come
No, it actually is.
on. It is the rear view
That's-
camera? Come
that's
on.
one of the things that's not going to be available. So yes, this is yet another rear view camera recall, but also your entire dashboard can go out. It looks like it's completely related to the video displays control module software. And some owners they'll actually get an OTA update to fix this and won't even have to go into their dealership. The other folks are going to have to go into their dealer and get the software update. And that should happen pretty soon. It looks like the planned owner notification date is next week.
Crazy. Last one, not a recall. This is a Office of Defects Investigation. This is for Kia, and it is involving their windshield wipers. The windshield wipers stop functioning while driving when snow or ice accumulates on or at the bottom of the windshield. Oh, that's kind of when I want my wipers to work.
Yeah, that could be inconvenient.
It could be.
Yeah, there's not a lot of details on this, but this is the most recent investigation, I believe, that was opened by NHTSA on 2425 Kia EV9. So there's not a lot of information other than that people's windshield wipers stop functioning when snow or ice accumulates there. Hopefully, they'll get this fixed before next winter.
Right. My guess is weak motors, because we've seen similar things like this before. All right. And that's it for now. Thanks, listeners. We'll be back next week, and we'll tell you all about what happened with Tesla's Robotaxi.
Thanks for listening. Stand by.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
For more information, visit www.autosafety.org.